Hello everyone, this is Aussie Select back to talk about the Australian Capital Territory 2024 election. We have the final results here on the ABC, and I'm just going to do a little analysis of what our predictions were and how it compared to the final results. Now, our original predictions were actually quite accurate. The only differences that we had was that in Brindabella, we thought that there would be 3 Liberals instead of a Green. And then in Murrumbidgee, we thought that this final FCI Fiona Carrick Independent would be a Green. But apart from that, our prediction was pretty accurate. We did think the Greens would fall to 4 seats. We just did not expect the Fiona Carrick Independent, which we'll look at first, which is probably the silliest thing we didn't notice, because Fiona Carrick in the previous ACT election actually ended up getting 7%, and I believe she was an ungrouped candidate. So getting 7% as an ungrouped candidate, I think, is a pretty big deal. So it actually sort of makes sense that she ended up getting a 6% swing while she was above the line, and then she ended up getting a seat. So I think we probably should have called that, and it was a pretty conclusive win for her in the seat of Murrumbidgee. Now, the 2 seats I predicted wrongly on the night. I think Sormon wasn't really willing to give a prediction because a lot of the results weren't coming in yet. But the 2 seats that I predicted incorrectly was Yarrabee. In this seat, I actually thought that the final seat would go to Independents for Canberra, who, even on the night, were, I think, about 2% lower than the Greens on the primary vote. But I just suspected that the overflow from the Canberra Liberals would go to the Independents for Canberra, and that Labor didn't have 2 quotas, so they would soak up the left-wing vote. But I think what ended up happening was that a lot of people's preferences exhausted, and so when you have a higher primary vote like what the Greens have here, that's sort of what's more important, and perhaps the kind of people who would actually preference, as opposed to letting their vote exhaust and not go to anyone, are the kind of people that would preference the Greens as their second or third choice. So Independents for Canberra didn't get enough of those much needed preferences and missed out on getting a seat there that I thought they might. The other seat was Brindabella, which is the last one to be called. And I actually thought that 3 Liberals would be elected here. And judging by the first preference vote, you can kind of see why. The Canberra Liberals were ahead of their competition, which is the Greens or Independents for Canberra. There was also a suggestion that the Labor Party might actually get 3 seats here, because if you do look at this, there is quite a bit of a vote for these sort of lefty minor parties: Animal Justice Party, First Nations Party, Independents for Canberra, and AEST Greens. So it did seem like if there was preferencing, which is something that is more common within left-wing voters, that the Labor Party could have got that seat, but I didn't expect that the Labor Party would get that seat. I thought it was, again, between the Liberals, the Greens, or Independents for Canberra. And I thought the Independents for Canberra, for the same reasons as Yarrabee, would have a better chance than the Greens, because they're sort of more moderate. They're going to sort of soak up more preferences. But I think it just came down to the Greens had a higher start than Independents for Canberra, and then people who tend to more likely preference the Greens, and so therefore the Greens overtook the Canberra Liberals, absorbed the Independents for Canberra vote, and got the final seat. So the final result is a status quo Labor Greens coalition government. Nothing interesting going on here. We thought on the night that they would have to resort to minority government, needing either Fiona Carrick or the Teals. There was a suggestion that perhaps this would be the first time we would see the Teals in a kingmaker position, and would put them in an interesting position because it could be weaponized as who they might side with in the upcoming 2025 federal election, if that comes down to them deciding government. But we didn't see that. The Labor Party and the Greens did not need Fiona Carrick. They did not need the Teal Independent. They are very much able to form a majority government with 14 seats. They only needed 13. So yes, conclusive win. The Liberals only got 9 seats, not even as much as Labor. I was a little bit surprised that people were calling it as a Labour win on the night as early as they did. I thought that we should wait a little bit, but people did say that Fiona Carrick is a progressive independent, and so is the Teal independent. So it wouldn't make sense for them to give government to the Liberals. I guess that's why people called it for the Labour Party on the night. And here's the final map. The brown one there is the independents for Canberra. Interesting that the Greens managed to nab seats in the most conservative electorates. But generally, this is a good result for independents as well, because there hasn't been independent representation in the ACT in some time. So definitely a loss for the Canberra Liberals. And I believe that they are trying to, in the future, become less right-wing to position themselves for the next ACT election. That's it. Thank you for watching, everyone. Please remember to check out the live stream tonight at 6:30 p.m. AEST, which will be 7:30 p.m. AEDT, which will be 7 p.m. Australian Central Time. Myself and Sormon will be streaming on Sormon's channel. The Queensland state election shall be a very interesting election coming up tonight. Be there or be square. Goodbye, everyone.